Number 1.
Patricia was last seen in Westfield, New York on April 3, 1976. She lived with her husband, Ernest Lamarres Jr., on North Portage Street. In March that year, Patricia told her brother she was having marital problems and he took her to stay with their mother in Westkirk, New York. She later returned to live with Ernest in Westfield, however. On April 5, Ernest called Patricia's brother to ask if he'd seen her. He said Patricia had left 2 days before. She has never been heard from again. Patricia's brother was suspicious of Ernest's story and broke into the Lamarres residence to look for clues. All her belongings were gone, including her clothes. Ernest reported his wife missing, saying he thought she might have gone to Chicago, Illinois. There was no evidence of a crime and police had little to go on. Ernest eventually moved away from the residence. In 1993, investigators searched the Lamarres' former home for Patricia's body, digging up the backyard, the basement floor and a concrete addition to the house. Her brother got permission for the dig from the home's new owners and paid for the search. Nothing was located. Although there is no evidence of a crime in Patricia's case and no one has been named as a suspect in her disappearance, her brother is convinced she met with foul play. He described her as a little slow and said he didn't think she could have survived if she left on her own. Patricia is a 1968 graduate of Dunkirk High School. She left behind 2 young children. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 2.
Lamarres began a 3-day alcohol rehabilitation program at Mercy Community Hospital in Port Jervis, New York on February 26, 2001. Her boyfriend, Joe Puccio, says she returned to the converted barn apartment they shared with his 4 children on Pine Hill Road in Sugarloaf, New York, packed her belongings into a dark-colored sedan, and drove away with another individual. She apparently did not tell her boyfriend where she was going. Lamarres left her brown 1984 Datsun behind when she disappeared. She has never been heard from again. Puccio could not recall the date she vanished, but believed it was around March 1. Lamarres called in sick at her place of employment, the Chester Forum Diner, on February 17, 9 days before she entered the alcohol program. She told her employer she had broken her toe. He never heard from again after that. She was a troubled woman prior to her disappearance, but she had always stayed in touch with her young son, who lives in Puerto Rico with his father. Lamarres had left her husband for Puccio in 2000. Neighbors say she and Joe often had violent drunken quarrels. Her family reported her missing on April 3, 2001, over a month after she vanished. They had become worried after she did not call her son on his birthday and tried and failed to reach her. Her phone was turned off. Lamarres has 6 siblings, who all live between Brainerd, Minnesota and Sarasota, Florida. They believe she may have met with foul play, as it is uncharacteristic of her not to contact them for so long. Police have questioned Puccio and searched his house and boat several times, but he has not been charged in connection with Lamarres' case, nor is he being called a suspect. Lamarres is a 1977 graduate of Brainerd High School in Brainerd, Minnesota. Her case remains unsolved. Police are treating it as a missing persons investigation, as there is no evidence of foul play.
Number 3.
Blake was last seen late in the evening in Midtown in the New York City borough of Manhattan on December 10, 1967. He had dinner and several drinks with a female acquaintance that day, then they took a cab at her apartment on East 54th Street afterwards. Blake wanted to come up to her apartment, but she refused to let him because she had to work the next day. She suggested he take the waiting cab to his studio apartment in Greenwich Village, but Blake said he would take a subway instead. He was last seen walking to the subway station. Blake has never been heard from again. He was not reported missing until 4 days had passed. At the time of his disappearance, Blake was employed as the sports editor for Newsweek. Many of his co-workers believed he left of his own accord. Blake was reportedly dissatisfied with his job, had problems with drinking, and was struggling financially due to a divorce settlement. He had separated from his wife, with whom he had 2 children. His co-workers believe he was depressed at the time of his disappearance but not suicidal. His disappearance was investigated by the Pinkerton Detective Agency, in addition to the New York City Police Department. Blake graduated from Syracuse University. He belonged to Phi Beta Kappa, an honors society, there. He enjoys smoking cigars, and he is very interested in literature, theater, folk and country music, and sports. Blake was unimpressed with material wealth in 1967. If he is alive today, he may be living a simple lifestyle. He was declared legally dead 7 years after his disappearance, but his case remains unsolved. His son continues to search for him.
Number 4.
Lamarres left his native Ghent, Belgium without warning on January 25, 2002. He told his mother he was going to school, where he studied mathematics with hopes of enrolling in the University of Ghent. He said he would be working at Pizza Hut that evening and suggested his mother take the 9 a.m. train to her job in Brussels, Belgium, instead of her usual one. Unbeknownst to his mother, Lamarres planned to take the train himself to the airport. When he didn't return home, his mother called his workplace and found out he was not, in fact, scheduled to work that day. Lamarres's mother reported him missing. In their investigation, police discovered he'd erased his computer hard drive, secretly obtained a passport and flown to New York City, New York. Due to American immigration laws, Lamarres was required to purchase a return ticket upon his arrival in New York City. It's unclear whether he intended to use the ticket, which was booked for February 9. In any case, he didn't board his return flight. Records show Lamarres's passport was used to cross into Canada at Niagara Falls on January 25 and re-enter the United States on January 31. He has never been heard from again. Lamarres's backpack was found at Prospect Park in Niagara Falls, New York at 4:15 p.m. on February 2, the day after a heavy ice storm hit the area. It contained his passport, his return plane ticket, $10 in American currency, $25 in Canadian coins, a pocket knife, taxi receipts, 36 CDs of classical music, a CD player, and a hardcover copy of J.D. Salinger's classic novel The Catcher in the Rye. Lamarres identified with the book's protagonist, Holden Caulfield, a teen misfit who runs away to New York City after he fails out of high school. Lamarres attempted suicide at age 16 by jumping off a 6-story building. He later told his mother he had tried to take his own life because he was upset about his parents' divorce. He was severely injured in the fall, he spent 6 months in a hospital and was confined to a wheelchair for a year. Lamarres made a complete physical recovery in the 2 years after the incident and appeared to recover mentally as well. He found a job, returned to school and was released from his psychiatrist's care. Niagara Falls is a popular spot for suicides, but no trace of Lamarres's body was ever found there. His mother hopes he didn't harm himself and instead began a new life in the United States or Canada. A bus stop, where anyone can board a bus without identification, is just down the street from the trash can where his belongings were found. Lamarres is interested in classical music, philosophers such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer, and basketball. His case remains unsolved.
Number 5.
Faith's husband of 18 years, Werner Lipp, said he last saw her leaving their home on Little Lake Road in Cortlandt, New York at 1:30 p.m. on October 3, 2008. She had just returned from running errands when she said she had to go out again, climbed into a Jeep with an unknown person, and never returned. Werner said Faith left her purse behind in another person's car and all her other belongings, including her cellular phone, but a pair of earrings worth $10,000 to $15,000 disappeared with her. A photograph of Werner is posted with this case summary. She has never been heard from again. Werner said he was concerned when Faith didn't come home that night, but he didn't try to call her. The following day, he drove to Connecticut to ask a friend how to file a missing persons report. He then had lunch, checked on his boat at the marina, drove home and called 911 to report Faith's disappearance. In the wake of Faith's disappearance, Werner threw out all her clothing and her health food. Police initially said they didn't believe foul play was involved in Faith's case, but in late October, Werner confessed to her murder. He told a friend he had hit Faith over the head with a piece of wood, then shoved her unconscious body in a 55-gallon oil drum he had previously used as a burn barrel. Werner stated he burned Faith's body for over 24 hours. At the time he heard Werner's confession, his friend was wearing a recording device at the behest of the police. When investigators confronted Werner with the recording, he confessed again to them, even describing the color of the ashes. Werner worked as a jeweler and had made expensive pieces for such high-profile figures as Donald Trump and Yoko Ono. He has experience with high-temperature fires, as he used a propane and oxygen torch to melt gold and platinum in his jewelry workshop. One of Faith's friends described Werner as a controlling and verbally abusive husband. There were 2 domestic disturbances in the marriage where the police were called to their home, but no one was arrested either time. The Lipps was in the process of a divorce, and Werner, who was born in Poland and lived in Germany and Austria before emigrating to the US in 1979, already had 2 ex-wives in Europe. Werner admitted he and Faith argued constantly and stated he had their teenage son record their disagreements on audio tape to use during the divorce proceedings. A conference between the Lips, their lawyers, their two children and the children's guardians ad litem were scheduled on October 8, 5 days after Faith's disappearance. Following his arrest for second-degree murder, Werner recanted his confessions. When police went to his residence to confiscate the burn barrel as evidence, it was gone, and they never found it. Werner was tried in February 2010. His confessions were ruled admissible and were brought up as evidence against him in the trial. After 4 days of deliberations, however, the jury was unable to reach a verdict in the case, deadlocking at 7-5 for acquittal. The judge declared a mistrial, and Werner was retried in October 2010. This time he was convicted. He faces a maximum of 25 years to life in prison at sentencing. Faith worked as a nutrition consultant for Ossining New York schools at the time of her disappearance. Although the Lip home is in Cortlandt, it has an Ossining mailing address, and some reports say Faith disappeared from Ossining. Faith's remains have never been found and are not believed to be recoverable, but foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved.
Number 6.
Lisey was last seen in Addison, New York on September 30, 2011. He and a 20-year-old friend, Robert Nicholas Neal Knight III, stopped at Lisey's uncle's home at 2 p.m. and said they were going to Buffalo, New York, to possibly go camping. They were driving a gray 2004 GMC Canyon pickup truck with the New York license plate number EG7316. They said they'd borrowed from Knight's grandfather, but Knight's grandfather doesn't own such a vehicle. Lisey had phone contact with his family the next day, October 1. He may have been sighted in the Franklin-Nashville area of Tennessee that day. His phone pinged off a cell tower in Franklin at or near a residence on Flintlock Drive at 4:08 p.m. This was the last signal from it. Lisey had lived with relatives in Franklin in 2009 and attended the 11th grade at Franklin High School for a few months before he moved back to New York. He has never been seen or heard from again. On the morning of October 1, Knight arrived at his parents' home in Romulus, Michigan. He said Lisey had dropped him off there, but no one actually saw Lisey. On October 3, Lisey's mother got his driver's license in the mail. Someone had found it on a street in Hornell, New York, about 15 minutes from Lisey's home, and mailed it back. His mother, who was already worried because she hadn't heard from her son in several days, got even more concerned after receiving the license. Lisey's Facebook page had been shut down without warning around that same time. Lisey's family reported him missing on October 5, and the Michigan police questioned Knight on October 8. While he was being interviewed, the police decided to take him to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. Knight was released from the hospital the next day. At 8 p.m. on October 10, he was found dead of a drug overdose at his parents' home. Authorities haven't said whether they think Knight's death is related to Lisey's disappearance. The pickup truck Lisey had been driving in when he vanished could not be found after his disappearance. In July 2016, 4.5 years after Lisey's disappearance, authorities finally located it, completely stripped down and locked inside a garage in a private home in Franklin, Tennessee. Foul play is suspected in Lisey's case, which remains unsolved.
Number 7.
Laurang was last seen in Galway, New York on July 31, 2001. Has never been heard from again. He was reported missing by his father several days later. Laurang lived in the 2200 block of Cook Road in Charlton, New York at the time of his disappearance and also ran an auto detailing business there. After his disappearance, his dog was found alone on the property. It had been left without food and water. When the police searched his residence, they found what they characterized as explosive devices in his garage. Laurang's father stated the explosive devices were hunting rifles, black powder and handguns. Laurang has no criminal record and no history of erratic behavior, and he was behaving normally prior to his disappearance. It's uncharacteristic of him to be out of touch with his family. He was last known to be driving a 1994 Chrysler Lebron convertible sedan with New York license plates. This vehicle was found abandoned in Albany, New York several weeks later. Laurang is a Marine veteran who attended Schenectady High School. His father stated he was known to carry large amounts of cash, and he believes his son was mugged and killed. His disappearance is considered suspicious and his case remains unsolved.